Rich, how are you?
Wonderful. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. This has been a long time coming.
It has. It has. If there's anything that is a testament to resilience and perseverance, it's our friendship and our connection on this podcast. We're
Right?
we're we're lifers at this point.
We are lifers, both in podcasting and then in Spotify music lists, which we still
Yes.
need to work on
Oh
for
my gosh.
certain.
Yes. Yeah. I trust me. I have my Spotify open at all times, and I'm always coming up with ideas. So we need to collaborate on that as soon as possible.
Yes. Speaking about collaboration, thank you to the platform of LinkedIn for connecting us and some of our joint colleagues that work in the space. And you and I have kind of been, LinkedIn friends, and we've struck up a friendship over the last year, just
Mhm.
talking about the legal ops community and around some of the speaking engagements that you've done. And so I'm so excited for us to finally like dig in and talk about some of the areas that you specialize in. So what I want to know first is tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you got to what you're doing today.
Sure.
And we can dig into the topic of emotional intelligence, which I'm super
Yeah.
excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to be here. This is gonna be so much fun. So if you're listening, hold on to your hats. We're gonna have a good time.
Yes.
So I am, and my background is typically in like the corporate sales and marketing for a long, long time. And then about 2015, I got into the legal space. So I started
Mhm.
working at law firms. I was an in-house business development manager and director, working with attorneys and working on client service projects. And the thing that got me into speaking, because speaking has become the big thing of what I've been doing over the last 6 years. I launched my business officially back in last October, 100%. But the thing that got me into speaking was an unexpected trip to the emergency room.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so,
I
as
didn't
as
know
we all
that.
know in the legal industry, there's this thing called stress
Hmm.
that's pretty rampant in our industry, and I was not managing mine at all. I was burning the candle at both ends. I was overworking myself, over spreading myself on projects. I just was not taking care of myself at all. And so one day I was having all the WebMD symptoms of a heart attack,
Oh no. Yeah.
the numb arm, I was sweating, my heart rate was through the roof. And so I got up and walked past my CMO's office. I said, I'm leaving and I don't know if I'm coming back, because I thought I was dying,
Oh my gosh,
and
Rich.
drove myself to the ER, wound up hooked up to an EKG machine. Side note, 10 out of 10, do not recommend that. It's not a fun experience. If you're going to go lay on a bed, make sure it's not in an ER.
Yeah.
And so there I am hooked up to this machine thinking like, what is going on? Where did I lose control here? The doctor comes in and says, well, good news and bad news. Good news, you're not having a heart attack. Bad news, you're having a massive panic attack.
Okay.
And so we talked for a while, and it was a slow day in the ER, and we were talking about this topic of emotional intelligence. And there's some serendipity here that I'll get to in just a second. But he turned me onto this book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0, which is
Mhm.
sitting behind me over here. And he said, this topic, it's helped me tremendously with my stress and anxiety. It's helped me put in, practices and tools that have helped me with my stress and anxiety. I highly recommend it. So I start reading this book, and all of these eureka moments start happening around,
Mm.
emotional management,
Yeah.
understanding my emotions, how we engage with other people, how to set boundaries, how to do all these things. So I have all this information, and it's helping me. I'm putting it into practice, and I'm seeing immediate results, which is phenomenal.
Yes.
And it's also the most universal topic I've ever come across in my entire life. And so combine this, there's a three-part combination here. So I have the knowledge, I have this innate personality where I love helping people. Whatever I can do to help other people, that's just near and dear to my heart. And then the third thing is the fact that since I was five, I've wanted to host The Price is Right. So if Drew Carey, if you're listening to this podcast, I am your heir apparent. So I have this personality, if you can't tell by the background, if you're watching and listening, if you need to go find this, but understanding that I had this personality that was not afraid to be out in front of people on stages, talking on podcasts and TV and things like that. That I wanted to share this information to help as many people, because as a society, holistically, we're struggling with our stress and anxiety. Specific to
Yes.
the legal industry, has the second lowest emotional intelligence of any industry in our country. And
Yes.
so here is this rampant need for help. And here I am with the knowledge and the abilities and the tools and the cartoonery of being able to get up and share this in a very fun and engaging way. That was my mission. And so I
Yes.
launched into speaking about emotional intelligence in the legal industry, and it just took off. And here I am now speaking globally to in-house counsel teams, legal operations teams, legal operations conferences, legal conferences, and then also corporate conferences in different organizations as well. Um,
Yes.
but it
I love
just,
that. That's
I
how I
love it.
first found out about you, as I heard about a keynote that you did, and then we started connecting. And I
Mhm.
want to take this. I'm going to take this a little bit deeper for your own personal story, and I
Mhm.
wanted to ask you around this timing of this event where we're having a massive panic attack and you're not taking care of yourself. Where along, because you've had a pretty transformational journey in your own health, your physical well-being. I've seen
Right.
some of your before and after pictures
Oh yeah.
of your health journey. So were those two tied together? Because you said, I wasn't afraid to be out in front of people. And I'm thinking to myself, was that the you before the transformation or was that the you after the transformation? So tell us a little bit about that, because I think it gives even more credibility to your story of being able to talk about emotional intelligence and transformation at the
Mhm.
same time. So you know, tell us a little bit about that part of the
Yeah.
story.
So the before and after transformation is definitely my weight loss, right? So
Yeah.
not many people are taking before and after pictures of their personality. Or maybe they are, who knows? But yeah, I will say, to answer the question, I've always had the ability and the desire to want to help people and be out in front of people. And
Mhm.
even if it was just making people laugh or making people feel like disconnect from what they did during the day and with the stresses that they had.
Yeah.
So, and then to add just yet another ridiculous thing to my life, my life resume is ridiculous, by the way. It's just, there are times I look at that, I look at pictures and stories, I'm like, how is this the same person? But yeah, I went through a 100-pound weight loss. Took about
Yes.
a year and a half to lose it all. It was all about implementing the right philosophies, changing the lifestyle of what I want to do. Because you can go do anything quickly. You can go lose weight quickly. You can go do all these things quickly, but it doesn't stick the way it should.
Right.
And so, doing the little things every single day to lose all that weight, and now this is the 26th year that I've kept it off, it helped me build that lifestyle of what I needed to do to be healthier. And emotional
Okay.
intelligence to me is the same way. Like, and the beauty of it is that you can enhance your emotional intelligence. It's not stuck like your IQ at a certain point. You can actually bounce your emotional intelligence up and down the scale at will. So the
Yes.
little things that you do every day, just like a weight loss transformation, can transform your emotional intelligence. You can raise it, which, thank God for the people that I work with that have a very low emotional intelligence. Like, there's hope.
Yes,
So,
yes. So
but
I
yeah,
love that. I love those two aspects of your story, right? Because you have your own personal transformation and you tackled that with a mindset shift and looking forward to where you wanted, which I always talk about, kind of the North Star, like this is where I'm going, baby steps to get there. And then coupling that with this learning you had around emotional intelligence and how your own personal mismanagement, if you will, of your emotions was leading you down this path, right? So you've got all of this background to take forward with your own personal experience, which I love, because I think when we speak from the heart, it's the most impactful. And then you bring it forward into developing these keynotes, talking to this specific community that is pretty, what's the word I want to say? Fractured, maybe broken a little bit with their own
mismanaged,
emotional
like you said,
mismanaged, their
right?
own mismanaged
Emotionally
emotional
mismanaged.
intelligence. And you bring all of that together. And I think that is why, and also because you're a rad DJ, all of those things make you an amazing speaker and able to connect to your audience. So I just wanted to get a little bit around the full 360 view of all the things that bring you here today that
Right.
make you such a phenomenal speaker on this topic.
Well, thank you. And for those listening, just to recap, like, 100-pound weight loss, DJ, speaker, Price is Right. Like, like I told you to hold on to your hats. I think this is going to be a fun episode. So here we are.
Right? Yes. I think about your experience and then I juxtapose it to some of the things that, we deal with in the legal industry, just around workload management, boundary. Those things are all deeply personal and important. But the thing that I really wanted to kind of tease out today is, how do you deal with that in teams of people, particularly, and we're going to take it back to CLM because that's where I live,
Right.
is in software implementation or transformation within an organization of process and people and technology. And we boil that down to the word change management. We try to encapsulate all of those things into change management. I really wanted to dig into your perspective of, how do you approach, or how do you have the best outcomes around that kind of transformation in an organization? So I wanted to spend some time picking your brain around your thoughts of the things you're hearing and the things you're talking to people about around how to achieve those North Stars when you're talking about emotional intelligence and change in an organization.
Sure.
Where do you start that conversation? Because it's a big
Yeah,
one.
no, it's a great question, and we'll unpack it quite a bit here. And I think it's a blend of a couple of things, right? It's emotional intelligence within the individual, and it's also their executive presence that they have in these conversations. And it's safe to say, but it's also like a lot of the things that I say too are very obvious when you say them out loud, but they're so hard to grasp within organizations. Like, hey, you should probably check in with the people that change affects to let them know that A, something's coming,
Right.
or B, maybe get some of their input of how it needs to be managed.
Yeah, so
And
important.
it's basic empathy, it's basic understanding. And I think so many times we get driven by the data, the revenue, the cost savings, the efficiencies, and all the
The
hard
metrics,
information.
right? The metrics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yes, the metrics are important. I'm not saying that they're not, but at the same time, your people matter more than the metrics do.
Yeah.
So if you're in a position where you're making these decisions and you're in a leadership position or a decision-making position, and you're just looking at the data and you're not thinking about the people that it impacts, you're in for a world of hurt. Like the
Agree.
change that you're about to implement is just the tip of the iceberg of what you're going to have to manage moving forward.
Right.
Because we've all probably been in that situation too, where somebody told us we're doing this, you even go back to your childhood because I said
Yeah.
so. Like,
Because I said so.
right.
I never responded well to that because I said so.
No.
I always wanted to know why.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why we're now all in this industry, right? Because we're
Yes.
question askers and we're thinkers.
Yeah.
But when we think about the emotion, because all of our daily lives have emotion tied into it. Everything that you do, I don't care if it's the most bland spreadsheet or platform implementation or anything, if you're working on something, there's emotion involved. There's stress involved. There's headspace involved in everything. So if
Yes.
you take that out of the equation, there's a big miss there. And I've seen it happen with organizations. I've been in organizations where that's happened, and you watch the fallout happen. And it doesn't necessarily happen in like an all company meeting per se, but it's when people start hearing about the trickle down effects of what's going to happen, or they're hearing about how it's going to affect their workflow. Maybe they're hearing it from somebody else besides the leader or the decision maker. That becomes this toxic drop in the water that creates this negative emotional contagion that just spreads throughout different teams, different organizations, different verticals within your company. So,
Yes.
and some people will push back and say, well, I can't ask we've got 5,000 people that work for our company. I can't ask everybody what they think about this change. I'm not saying that you have to do that. But
Yes.
if you blend the impact that it has to the major players that are going to be affected by whatever change is coming, and describe to those individuals maybe that aren't directly infected, but it impacts them in some way. Here's why we're doing this. Here's how it's going to help you first. Here's how it's going to make your life easier. Here's how it's going to save you time. Here's how it's going to help our business. But then most importantly, here's how it's going to affect our clients. Here's how we're going to be able to provide better client service and engagement. And we're going to have better client loyalty. All of those factors need to be taken into consideration when you're implementing any kind of software, when you're doing any kind of change management, digital transformation, especially, because even though you may tell me, like, think about when we started going to email from fax machines. For those of you that are under a certain age, a fax machine is this thing that we put paper in that we sent it paper to paper.
But I still get really angry about when someone asks me to do today. I'm like, I can't email it. What are you telling me?
And that was a digital change, right? We were resistant to that. It was scary. Yes. The World Wide Web, when it came out, we're like, well, what is this?
What is this?
Now here we are. We couldn't imagine our lives without it.
Right.
So if you imagine you're changing what I do on a daily basis, which we're all resistant to change in this industry, especially, society overall, but specifically in the legal industry. Mm-hmm. There's a way that you can soften the blow. How is it benefiting these people? How, in the long run, if they buy into it, is it going to help them and make their lives easier?
Yeah.
You focus on those things too with the metrics, you're going to get more buy-in. Are you going to make everybody a raving fan of it? Of course not.
Of course not. Yeah, I often say that there's a couple of different layers to that messaging, right? And I like to say change management starts at the very beginning of the project when you're including your stakeholders and you're including your leaders around the decisioning to pick the tool. Like, it needs to start really early on. And I'm not advocating making it a democratic process across, the entire organization where you've got analysis paralysis, but pick your key stakeholders that you're going to partner with in the tool and bring them on board at selection or early so that there's a cohesiveness that starts to form. And then I think the other thing, when you're talking about staff that might be impacted, how do you start to talk to them about the change? And sometimes I find what's successful is maybe putting out a survey early on to say, we're considering doing this. What is your feedback? What do you think about the tools? So it's a little bit of a teaser that something's coming and we really want your feedback as we're starting this journey. Those kinds of small nuggets of involvement with your teams can go a long way to sort of opening the door just for comfort level, right? And to feel like they're included. So those are some things I've done early on. What are some things that you've heard have maybe been successful as far as messaging around? I would love to hear more about executive presence or how leaders, you're coaching leaders to talk to their folks about transformation.
Sure. Yeah. And I would even take a step back. I love exactly what you just said. I think I'd even take a step back further in the process on that, and in the sense that companies that are truly involved with their teams and their organization for the success of the whole will ask process improvement questions along the way.
Yes.
So let's also go, prior to even considering any kind of a software implementation or any kind of digital transformation, what's working in your workflow and what's not?
Yes.
What do you see as efficiencies and inefficiencies? And then that even gets higher rates of buy-in, because now the teams and the organization and maybe the staff that you don't want to bring into the democratic process, but at least their concerns and their frustrations have been heard. And 9 times out of 10, any kind of confrontation just comes down to the fact that somebody wants to be heard and seen.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
And so it's not that they need a resolution, or they don't need their thing brought to full completion to solve their individual problem. But if I just feel like you care and that you're interested in what's going on in my world, I'm more likely to listen and buy in when it all comes out.
Yes.
So I think taking even that further step back of continuing this process improvement conversation within your organization, not just starting it up when you're deciding to do something different.
Right.
So that to me is huge.
I love that. I'm with you. I was just thinking, another thing that I find is that a lot of organizations, we're talking really, really early in the process, right? And we can talk about the middle here in a second. But what I wanted to say, and what your comment made me think of, is a lot of organizations think about putting change management at the end of the project, like it's just training and some comms. And I find that is not the approach, because people aren't understanding. They're not along the journey with you, and they want to be informed, and they want to feel like they have some ownership. Do you think, how important is that piece of it for them to feel, you mentioned feel heard, but also feel some ownership or some involvement in the process? Is that part of the emotional intelligence journey, is involvement? And speak to me a little bit about what you think about that sort of end to end and the pieces that are involved.
Right. 150%. So I think let's go to the middle piece of that process, where maybe a decision has been made and there's a rollout coming. Think about any other situation where there's a change coming that you're getting consistent updates, whether it's, software updates, or, we here in Kansas City, we have some major construction going on the highways, but we're getting updates all the time of what's happening and what's going on and why. And so even just hearing that lessens the frustrations. Is it ideal? No. Do I understand a little bit better? Sure. But if I'm kept in the know along the way and getting process updates and milestone updates, and here's where we are with this, and this is what's coming next, and this is what's going to happen, and setting the expectation along the way, and just keeping people in the know, it's not hard to do, because here's the opposite. If you don't do that, you wind up getting a team of people that's so in the weeds of the project that they don't see the forest for the trees.
Right.
And they're like, we're in this, we're just trying to get to the finish line. They get to the finish line, and this small collective group has decided, we have succeeded. It has happened. We are done. Now it's just we're going to send out an email, do an all-day training, and everything's going to be fine.
And everyone's going to be on board, and adoption will be, perfect.
Right.
No.
I hate Jack in the Boxes, and that is the Jack in the Box effect.
Yes.
So
that's the Jack in the Box change
time,
management approach.
Anybody listen to this, the next time they go through a software implementation or a project or a digital transformation and they're not communicating, I want you to hear the Jack in the Box sound. Yes. I want you to hear that song, because what's about to happen is that you're about to jump scare the entire organization.
Yeah. I think we've
Or,
just coined a new term, Rich, the Jack in the
hey,
Box change management
exactly.
approach. Anyway.
Yeah, the title of this should be "Don't Jump Scare Your Company with Digital Transformation."
Right. Yes.
Um, I mean, think about it. Would you rather keep people in the know and keep people aware, just if they can be observers and
Mhm.
understand where things are at and what's coming next? That eases our mind when we know what's coming next.
Yes.
We're not fumbling around in the dark with our eyes closed trying to figure out where the stairs are at this point.
Mhm.
We're understanding how to get to where we need to get to, and we're all along the way together, even though we don't maybe have exact buy-in or exact involvement in the process itself. Maybe we're just staff just getting the email updates of like, here's where we are in the process, here's what's coming next, here's what you can look forward to.
Yes.
That will ease everybody's mind in
Yeah.
some way, shape, or form.
I think we've hit on two main areas, and it's bring your stakeholders along as early as you can. Get
Mm-hmm.
the pulse of your end users, whether that be survey or interviews or conversations, so you can get their feedback on process early. And
Mm-hmm.
then during communication, right, updates, making sure that they are understanding what's happening. When you're delivering those messages, how can you deliver messages around the software implementation happening, whether you like it or not, with the
Mm-hmm.
most empathetic delivery? How would you talk to people about that?
Sure. Great question. I think this is one of the biggest misses of any internal conversations with companies, internal communications, top-down conversations, where there's just a lack of empathy in the delivery. Because it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, we've done it, really no turning back at this point. So do we have to be empathetic? No. And most organizations, unfortunately, choose that route.
Right. I
But
think
if
they
you
go
could have,
factual, right? They just go
yeah, exactly.
factual
Like,
delivery.
here's
Yeah.
what we did. We've already spent the money. We've already spent 9 months rolling this out. It is now embedded in our system. We're now doing this. And here is the playbook of all the different things and all the new key features that you need to do and all the process
Yes.
flow. Like that,
And here's
nothing
about
will.
55 links. You can go
Right.
out and check. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Here's 27 different training modules that you need to go watch
Yes.
on your own to figure out how to do
Right.
this thing. Like,
Right.
stop.
Right. Right. Right.
So one, as you're rolling this communication out and as you're talking along the way too, it's a lot of we and us and communication that is not the board decided or this was decided by us to you. So there's not a separation. You need to
Right. It's
all
not
be
done
in.
to you, right? This is
Correct.
something we're doing together.
We're doing it together. We're doing it with each other. We're doing it for each other. It's not it's not because we're doing it and you're just going to have to deal with it. And again, with those communication milestones, go back to the original communication of this is why we're doing it. This is how it's
Mm-hmm.
going to help. This is what's, community, keep reminding people of that. And then
Yes.
when you actually come to that implementation rollout, and here's day one, or here's day zero that we're going to be talking about it. It's the we conversations, but then also give some feedback forms. And again, most people are terrified of this because they're like, oh my gosh, we're going to get bombarded with questions and emails and people are going to be mad. Well, they're going to be a little bit, upset at times. There are going to be some people that are going to be rubbed the wrong way. But again, if you don't give that opportunity, you're more likely to have people festering in their offices or at home or at their desk because they don't feel seen and heard. So it's
Yes.
not you have to worry about this onslaught or this avalanche of mail coming in or complaints coming in. You're going to have to deal with some things. But again, empathetic responses like, I'm sure that's very frustrating for you.
Yeah.
I understand. Let's talk through how we can come to the best resolution. And it's that conversation where I feel like you care about what I feel and think. And you want to try to find, maybe you're not going to be able to solve things, or you're not going to go unplug everything because I'm just not happy with the fact that I have to click 3 buttons instead of 4. Like it's not gonna make that big of a difference. But if I just understand that you care, that you understand and see and hear me, that's usually all you need.
Right.
But just that ability to say, I understand, I can see why you feel that way. Here's what we can talk through and let's come to an understanding. Can you tell me more about why you feel this frustration? Think about any situation, anybody who's doing any of these rollouts. Think about the last time change came your way or news came your way and somebody said, sorry, deal with it. Or
Yes.
I got you. Let's figure this out together.
Yes.
Which one
Yeah.
do you want to be perceived as?
Right. I think that what you're saying is so valuable, and I think a lot of leaders don't understand, or they're not considering the fact that they need to bake in time for those conversations. We are all so incredibly busy, and when you, I can tell you, as being in a leadership role, when I have meeting requests after meeting request after meeting request, I'm just running from one meeting to the next, and I know that can feel overwhelming sometimes. And of course, setting boundaries around that, your own personal schedule, is important. That I'm not dismissing. But what I do want to call out to our leaders is when you're in that role and you are the leadership voice, you should bake in time and take those meetings with your peers, colleagues, and teams that are panicking or that
Mhm.
need to be voice an opinion, and give them room to do that. Because while it may feel overwhelming in your own calendar,
Mhm.
it will help tremendously keep things like that festering, the conversation below the conversation happening internally. Like, what other things can that avoid, Rich? Like, it can avoid people just tuning out, not being involved, not feeling heard, and they're not gonna help the process along.
Right.
Anyway, what's your thought about making time for those conversations?
Sure. I think it should be part of the process. I think it
Mm-hmm.
should be part of when you roll out your roadmap. It shouldn't, you could do, let's just say, I'll just use my birthday because it's coming up. So July 15th is rollout day. Okay. When you're setting this roadmap forward, you need to book in July 13th and 14th as meeting days and just say,
Mm-hmm.
look, I'm just going to spend 2 days on a road trip or a tour, or we're going to have a virtual session or something where you can engage people to say, I just want to share what we're most excited about. I want to address some concerns, answer questions.
Yeah.
Because if you bake in that time on the front end, you're not thinking as you're going along, oh God, now like we're trying to get to the finish line, I don't have time, I've got everything else going on, I don't have time to go do this stuff. If
Yeah.
you put it in the front of the roadmap, if you build it in when you're building the roadmap, it becomes a non-negotiable. And it's a
Yes.
lot easier to say like, hey, 9 months from now, I have 2 days that I'm just going to be spending time with my teams, with my leaders, with my stakeholders, understanding and getting on the same page with everything. Because I'll tell you this, if you don't spend that 2 days doing that, and it makes it easier to book that way ahead in advance, prepare to be spending more time on, well, why did they leave? Well, how are we going to fill that position? Well,
Right?
why are they not as engaged as they used to be? There's a
Yes.
lot more work to be done on the backside of things. And
Mhm.
I'll get the percentage is a little bit of a generalization, but close to 70% of an individual's desire to stay with an organization is based on the empathetic perception of their leadership. So,
Wow.
so if
That's an
your
amazing
leaders
statistic.
are viewed as more receptive and to communication and to feedback, and if they're more empathetic in their delivery, that's a much higher likelihood that your teams are going to stay no matter what happens. So
Wow,
consider
that's
that.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to think that the touch points that you need to consider when you're planning, because I don't think we do a great job as leaders implementing software, saying I need to meet with my teams X, Y, and Z times to bake in exactly what you're talking about. And so practically, that's usually sort of at the kickoff of the project, I
Mhm.
find. And then maybe a couple of times in between. Sometimes user acceptance testing right before that kicks off is a good time, or
Mhm.
when we're demoing certain aspects of the tool, that's a good time to get together. It's sort of like
Mhm.
a touch point to, if you bake in, just like you said, that even travel time for budget. Think about those types of things, that touch points for you are going to save you soft costs later.
Right.
Take the time to plan out at least 2 or 3 touch points during the cycle. And I think even, at the go live, a little bit of a celebration for the folks that have spent all this time
Oh, that's
working on a project like this, because we all know we have day jobs. And when we ask folks to take on something like a CLM implementation, they're balancing their home life, they're balancing their actual work, and they're balancing this work. And let's really take the time to celebrate them. So those key kind of areas, touch points, I always say are good times to do that. And then
Mhm.
think about that in your budgeting, right?
I love what you just said. I think that is such a huge miss too, to just have, instead of a, hey, I just want to thank the team for all their hard work. Like, give me a break. These
Yeah.
people just broke their backs for 9 months
Yeah.
to help the organization be better, make more money, be more efficient, and that's what happens. Like, I agree. I think there should be some. I think I'm a big believer in celebration for any milestone, really.
Yeah.
But if you put into that roadmap, so two things that I'm not trying to shame anybody. I want you to go look at your current project roadmap right now. Peel it back. Number
Hmm.
one, do you have a celebratory mark on that roadmap? When are you celebrating the team that is killing themselves to get this thing done?
Yeah.
Second of all, look at that roadmap and explain to me where in there you have conversational milestones and landmarks, not just check-in meetings or status updates, because that typically is an information out meeting.
Yes.
Here's what's
Yes.
going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a back and forth. It's not a two-way conversation. Build in, and again, I'm not trying to shame anybody because this is a common problem.
Mm-hmm.
So build those two things in, and empathy is not measurable because it's priceless. But if you can measure the satisfaction from a sentiment standpoint, how does your organization and how do your teams feel about the change that you are now implementing with those put in based off of or compared to previous projects where you just got things done and you hoped for the best?
Yeah. And then at that celebratory event, we need to have Rich come and DJ. I mean, that would solve all the problems.
Done. For all of you that are now feeling really guilty about your project plans and your roadmap, I am available for a DJ celebration. And hey, you know what? That may be a great new package to add.
It might be. We should figure that out.
I definitely don't know any DJs that are offering roadmap celebration party services, but I am here for it.
Please carve that into your next SOW,
exactly.
folks listening.
I'll give you a CLMRX discount on that just because we mentioned it.
Be awesome. So you know so much about emotional intelligence and speaking about it. I think we've talked about some strong ways to incorporate it. What are some of the pillars of emotional intelligence for those folks that are, just hearing about this for the first time, or maybe they've heard about it, but they haven't, gotten into the weeds on it. So what's sort of the framework of emotional intelligence when you're thinking about it in an organization?
Yeah, when we think about emotional intelligence, the most simple way to think about it is this. You have the personal competence side of things, which is you and what you do and how you are, which is social awareness, which is identifying your emotions, good, bad, negative, positive, whatever. And then personal management or emotional management. And that is what you're doing with those emotions. Every time I get up and talk about emotional intelligence, I tell people on the front end, this is not intended to make you oblivious to a bad mood. This is not intended to make you oblivious to stress and anxiety. What is it intended to do is allow you to identify it quicker and manage the end result of it better.
Yeah.
Because I have it too. Like watch me try to get my kids out the door to school with their shoes tied, and you'll watch my emotional intelligence fracture.
Let's test it.
Exactly. My kids know how to test my emotional intelligence better than anybody. Yes. But if you have that, you have a higher ability to identify your emotions, because most of us don't know how to do that truly, but then what you're doing with them as well. And in our industry, that personal management, that emotional management is really low. If you think about a lot of people that are very stressed and tend to have outbursts or a little bit more hot-headed, or they get really stressed and anxious, we're not managing our emotions effectively.
Right.
So that's the personal competence side of things. And then of course there's the social competence, which is social awareness. How am I engaging with you? Am I a good active listener? Am I watching your body language and listening to your tone when I'm listening to you? Am I being empathetic? What am I doing to engage you and make this a two-way street relationship and connection? And then all of those things rolled into one is relationship management, which is the fourth pillar of it. So, I'd always encourage people to say, okay, think of the first 5 people that you know or that you work with, first 5 people that come to mind. And if you rank your relationship with them on a scale from 1 to 10, you're going to have people at various numbers. Chances are nobody's ever going to get to a 10, because I think 10 is unachievable or unattainable. But if you get somebody that's like maybe a 7, 8, 9, those are great relationships. Maybe you've got people that are a 4 or 5. What is the gap in that relationship, or what's lacking from that connection? And I'll be honest, there are people that I've worked with that, my relationship with them was at a 2, and just getting them to a 5 was a massive win.
Yes.
We were never going to be best friends. We were never going to joke around. We just needed to get things done together. And so even getting it to a 5 resulted in a 9 or a 10, because that's all I really needed. That's all we really needed to succeed together. So
I love that.
Self-management, social awareness, and relationship management.
I'm going to come back to those pillars because I want to talk about one by one and just give our listeners some nuggets, right? So when you're talking about self-awareness, the first pillar, because we all get overwhelmed. We don't manage our calendars well, or our time, and we have outside stuff. Everybody's got it going on. What's a good 1-2 piece of solid advice for how people can work on or manage their self-awareness? What are some good takeaways?
Sure. This is my favorite part of the segment too, because I love the actionable takeaways to work on these kinds of things and identify them is my favorite. So with self-awareness, my favorite thing to mention, I'm a big fan of meditation, of just taking time to reflect. And so, because you say meditation, people are like, so you want me to like put a mat in my office with some candles? No, 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 no. What I mean is block time over lunch and block
Mhm.
time at the end of the day, 5-10 minutes max. And
Mhm.
all you need to do is shut off your devices, turn off your email, turn away from your screens, and just sit and think. Because if you start the day in a great mood, things are going fantastic, and then you're at lunch and you're like, why am I so stressed out? What we don't do is we don't take that time to sit and say, okay, what happened between then at the beginning of the day and now that has me in this mood? And it can also be positive too. Like I don't want to make it just all about bad triggers and bad emotions. But what happened in that course of 4 hours, 5 hours that now has us in the current mood that we're in? Identify those emotions, identify the trigger that caused that emotion, and then think about how you would practice a different response.
Yeah.
So if you do that, because what happens in our day, right? We get into these you mentioned it earlier, we get into back-to-back meetings, we're running downhill all day long,
Mhm.
and something may happen in a 9 o'clock meeting, and you're like, oh, that really rubbed me the wrong way, but I can't deal with it now because I'm late to the next meeting, and then I got to do the thing, and I got to do the thing, and we
Cram it
push the
down.
emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
push the emotion and we push it downhill. We compartmentalize it, and it festers. And
Yes.
at the end of the day, we maybe forgot what it was. Not that that's a good thing, because we can't go back and deal with what it was and change the response. So that
Yes.
midday and that end of day meditation, journaling, self-reflection, whatever you want to do, is invaluable.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if meditation feels woo-woo to you, then just think of it as a moment of self-reflection. And I like to incorporate gratitude into that, because
Mhm.
then I'm not just running through what were all the crap things that happened today, but what am I really grateful about? And if you need to do that midday at like a lunch walk, because you're also getting some vitamin D,
That.
people think that's crazy. How am I going to break away? But I work with a performance psychologist, and what she tells me always is you need the space and time to reflect so that you can recalibrate your performance and continue to operate at a high level. So building in that time for quiet self-reflection and just giving yourself a minute
Right.
is so beneficial, just for your own self-awareness, first pillar of your own emotional state. And then because that bleeds out to the other people that you work with, which I think is the second pillar, which is, tell me what the second one is. Is that the
Self-management.
self-management? Okay, so then I was jumping ahead to the how you deal with other people. So when we're talking about self-management, that is a tool, right? That's another tool, is giving yourself that quiet time. What are some other tools around self-management?
So one of my favorite ones to mention is what I call the adult passing period. And so when you think back on school, we've got all
Yes.
kinds of we may need to come up with like a line of merch and t-shirt for all the things we've come up with in this. Digital transformation jump scare and adult passing period will be hit. So with adult passing periods, if you think back to high school, middle school as well, we usually had 5 to 7 minutes between classes to go from English to math. You left one
Yes.
class, you got your books, you got a drink of water, you used the restroom, said hi to friends, but you also got to mentally change gears. Okay, I'm not in English anymore, I'm going to math. And so we had that time in our day to have that shift, even though it was only 5 to 7 minutes. That's all we really need.
Yes.
But when we, as adults, we wear this badge of honor of, look, there's no gaps in my schedule. It's all color coded and it's all fantastic, but it's back to back to back to back to back.
Yes.
And so I highly encourage people to go to 25-minute meetings and 45-minute meetings or 50-minute meetings. Give yourself a little bit more time. Number one, it gives you that time to recalibrate, to your point, to shift gears. And also, how many times do we come out of meetings where there's takeaways, things we should be delegating, an email that we needed to get back to, a phone call we needed to return, whatever that winds up being, but we don't have that time.
Yes.
Or I took 5 notes during this meeting that I really need to pay attention to, but I'm off to the next one because I'm 2 minutes late to the next Zoom call or the next thing. And I don't have
I'm
time
totally
to
guilty of that. I'm totally guilty of that, Rich. You know what I started doing is there's actually a setting in Outlook, if you use Outlook, where you can set your meetings to end 5 to 10 minutes early, which gives you that time period where you can, take a bio break, fill your water up, just write down the notes that you need to take, jot those down, and then look and see what's coming up next so you can shift your mindset to get ready for the next thing. And we don't need that much time to do it, but giving yourself just enough keeps you from feeling like you're just running a race all day. It gives you that minute. So I love that piece of advice. I think another one that people really struggle with in self-management, and I'd love your take on, is setting boundaries. And I think some of this speaks to setting boundaries because you're setting that time That's a boundary.
Mhm.
That little 5 to 10 minutes.
Mhm.
Doing that self-reflection is setting the time for that is also a boundary. So time boundaries. But can you give us some other examples of setting and holding boundaries as a part of your self-management piece?
Yeah, I've got a couple that I would love to share. So one of the things I did during the pandemic when I was working from home was that I would need to take breaks. And I would need to take screen breaks, total digital
Mm-hmm.
breaks. And so what I would do if I needed to get up and go for a walk or go grab some water, and I just didn't want to think about anything, I didn't want to be, because even if we were like, oh, I'm going to go down and get some water, we have our phone in our hand. We're,
Right.
we're, we're watching for a
We're looking
notification to
at
pop
why
up, or we're
yeah,
just,
yeah.
it's like, it's almost like a literal timing, like a ticking time bomb. We're like, what's going to happen next? And so if you do that, and what I started doing is setting literally like 5-minute out of office replies. Hey, I'm going to be unavailable for the next 5 to 7 minutes. If you absolutely need anything, please leave a message. I'll get back to you. I'll be back at 11:07. And I will
Mhm.
get back to your message at that time. If something is absolutely on fire, I will turn my ringer up. I will be able to hear it. Please call me if you absolutely need me in the next 5 to 7 minutes. In a year and a half, I never got one phone call during that time.
Oh
What I
yeah.
did get a lot of were emails saying, this is genius.
Oh, I love it.
Because psychologically, it allows us to put the devices down while we're fixated to them, and that causes a little
Mhm.
bit of anxiety for some people. When we put those things down, when we're not looking at our inboxes or our notifications or our Slacks or anything, we can actually let our mind relax more.
Yeah.
So would you rather fully take a break? Imagine saying like, I'm going to take a break from exercising, but I'm going to run on the treadmill during my break. No, you're still
Right.
doing something. And so
Right.
that mental break is the same way.
When I
Um,
leave my office to take, 5 or 10, I leave my devices in my office
yeah,
space, and I just go totally tech unencumbered, digital free. Anything burnt that like no houses have burned during the
no,
time that I've
no,
come back and not had my phone in my hand. And
right.
it just gives you a moment of peace throughout the day. So that's a great boundary, is just to
Mhm.
take the time and leave the device and don't feel like you have to respond. Just disconnect for those
Right.
few minutes.
And I love the word respond too, because I think from a personal communication standpoint, I think that's where the biggest problems with boundaries happen, where somebody comes to us with a project or a question or a need or something's on fire, and we feel the need to, one, say yes to everything,
Mhm.
two, that we need to have a response, and then specific to our industry, but on the whole, that we have to have the perfect response immediately, almost like we're buzzing the buzzer on Family Feud or something.
Right.
We need to know right now what the perfect answer is. And we don't set the boundaries of, one, saying no, or I can't take that on, because we're so worried. Number one, because we're people pleasers, but number two, does that make me look bad as a teammate?
Right.
Well, you know what looks worse as a teammate is if you're completely scattered because you've said yes to everything and nothing is getting done to a decent quality at all. Zero.
100%. 100%. I've been there, and I have to say, I work with some team members that are great. When I see someone that I'm like, how to set a boundary, when they say, I can't do that, I'm not available, and that's it. There's no apology, because there
Mhm.
doesn't have to be. And
Right.
I always silently applaud those people when I read their email, and I'm like, good for you for
Right.
recognizing you don't have to take that on, and it's okay to say no, because there's other people that can do that or pick that up. So I
Yeah.
think saying no is a fantastic boundary, and then holding it, like just
Yeah.
hold it.
And
I
I
think
love what
that's a
you just said.
struggle, right?
Yeah. And I have to capitalize something you just said that I think is so important. You don't have to over explain why.
Right.
I have stressed the idea, number one, that no is a complete sentence.
Yes.
But also, like, I put this into practice the other day, and this will sound horrible, but I think for those of us that have been in this position, which I think everybody has, you'll relate to the satisfaction and relief this felt. I am the worst about saying yes to social plans, like
Hmm.
things that I don't want to do, that I'm just like, yeah, that would be great, and I resent going as I'm driving to the thing. I'm like, I'd much rather just do nothing, or I have this other thing that I'm now putting off because I felt like I had to say yes.
Right.
And so somebody reached out to me not too long ago, and they asked me like, hey, do you want to go do this thing? And I said, I don't. I'm just not available. And that was it. I didn't
Yeah.
say because I have to do the thing, or because I have to do this other thing, or I really have to prioritize this, because we feel like we have to over explain to justify our answer.
100%. You do not have to
And
over explain.
right. And I was like, I would love to, but I'm just not available. And that was it.
Yes.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
and there was that moment of anxiety where because it was a text conversation, I put my phone down. I was like, am I a horrible person? But at the same time, I'm like, that felt so good.
Yeah.
And they're like,
Freeing.
oh,
It's
totally
freeing.
fine.
Yeah.
Because we also worry about what's the response going to be.
Right.
Are they going to
Yeah.
hate me? Are they going to think I'm a terrible person? Am I never going to be invited to their wine party ever again? Like,
And it's okay. I always
it,
tell my kids in that situation, their response is about them. So
exactly.
they can
Right.
own however they behave about your response, but you have agency to say no.
Yeah.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
love that. You have no control over anybody else's response. None.
Right. So I think that kind of segues us. Have we got to the third pillar, which is how you interact with others? And
Yeah.
I know I'm
Social
saying it
awareness.
wrong.
Yep.
Yes, yes. So I wanted to mention that in one of our very first sessions, we had a meeting coming up, and I
Hmm.
reached out to you and I said, my social battery's low. I don't know
Hmm.
if you remember this text
I
exchange,
do.
and I've just had a really long week, and I want our first interaction to be amazing. Can we reschedule? And you're like, no, totally no problem.
Yeah.
And so,
I thought you were
yes.
going to say, no, I said no. Like, we
No,
can't
no,
reschedule.
no. And I knew, I just had an innate sense about
Right.
you that you would be okay with that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of how we started off one of our early conversations. And I was like, okay, that immediately gave me a sense of psychological safety with you because
Hmm.
I could tell you, here's where I'm at. I'm being
Hmm.
vulnerable, that I
Hmm.
just don't have it today. Can we
Right.
reschedule? And you were like, cool, totally no problem. And so I thought, okay, like I can be safe. That's safe. So how do you, when you're talking about, that's just an example between you and I that happened,
Sure.
when you're talking about having that emotional intelligence in your interaction with others as part of that pillar
Hmm.
of emotional intelligence, give us some other samples around or examples around how you establish that or how you manage it. So I'm curious your
Yeah.
thoughts.
So one, to add on something to that example, what that also did on my side was that it made me realize how much I valued your personal boundaries and your self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So that immediately gave me a ton of respect for you. And I honestly like was a little bit envious of it. So I started, I remember that interaction. I was like, and maybe that's what led to my epiphany about saying no to the social thing. Because
Maybe. Yeah.
I didn't have it in me. I was
Yeah.
exhausted. So you taught me something about emotional intelligence. So there we go. But I think a
Nice.
lot of times, it's reading the room and being empathetic. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what would I have been, if I would have been upset and be like, gosh, how inconvenient. What is that going to do for me? Like that
Right.
does nothing for me. And to your point, and I greatly appreciate you saying that, it just builds a bond of trust and vulnerability and authenticity between the two of us and anybody else. And I think going back to the empathy conversation, so much is missed because most people are so worried about their world and they're not worried about anybody else around them. And
Right.
that will burn more bridges than anything. And
Yes.
it doesn't take anything and it doesn't hurt anybody to just care a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
and just understand that everybody, one of my favorite activities I've ever done was that and I learned this from another facilitator, but I asked a question at the beginning of a meeting that I was presenting a keynote and doing a workshop with this company. I put up an anonymous poll and I said, what is something that you're dealing with that nobody else knows about? And all the results started popping up in real time on the screen. And when
That
it
was
was
so mind blowing. Oh my
powerful.
gosh.
When I say that
Yeah.
the energy in the room shifted and you could
Mm-hmm.
feel it, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, some people would be like, really? Yes, really.
Yes. No, I
You
get that.
felt
Yeah.
an immediate, like there was one woman that burst into tears, unfortunately, but
Oh
she
yeah. Okay.
needed that.
Yeah.
She needed that psychological safety in that space to say, oh my gosh, I've not been dealing with this thing. I've not been carrying
Mm-hmm.
this. But it also made everybody realize we're all dealing with something.
Right.
We're all carrying something around. So if you just approach it that way, that if somebody says, hey, I'm overspent, hey, I can't make it, hey, my social battery is low, like understand that they've got something going on that is none of your business.
Yeah.
But you can also say, hey, absolutely fine. And the one thing that I normally, that I should have said is, if there's anything I can do to help and support you, please let me know. Because
100%.
that's just my sentiment always.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just that little bit of interaction goes such a long way.
I think it goes back to the golden rule, right? Just treat others the way you want to be treated. And I think we forget that so often. And if we
Mm-hmm.
could just remember that in most all interactions and think about the fact that if I was dealing with something, I would want Rich to be kind to me or maybe have some patience with me or just listen to me for a moment and
Right.
not cut me off or whatever the thing is, like I
Yeah.
just want to be heard or I'm just dealing with this. If we could, that is the essence of empathy, I think, is just to
Mm-hmm.
consider the other person's reception of
Yeah.
your message
Well,
or their ability to hear you.
Right.
Yeah.
And another t-shirt idea here. I heard one the other day that I love. So, adding on to the golden rule, it's called the platinum rule, about
Oh,
treating
okay.
other people, treating people how they want to be treated.
Yes. Yeah.
So understanding, like I've got friends of mine that I know are hardcore driven type A individuals. And that's just the way that I understand. And I ask them, like, what can I do to support you? How can I be the best friend to you? How can I be the best
Hmm.
colleague to you? And I listen to what they say back to me. And this is all part of social awareness and relationship management.
Hmm.
But when they come back and say, if you don't hear from me for 3 straight days, just reach out and ask me if I'm okay. And that's how they want to be treated,
That's
as opposed to
awesome.
me
It's like
saying
they're
like,
giving you the framework for how to be in relationship with them. You're
a
like, oh, that's
hundred,
thank
a
you, right?
100%. And
Yes.
think about it, flip the table here. So
Hmm.
some people will be like, well, I have this one person that, complains all the time, or I have this one person that's, and so you'll have the person that tries to poke holes in this concept. But if
Yes.
you think about people treating you how they want to be treated, but you don't like the way they treat themselves, that's an awkward situation. So if somebody came to you and said, hey, John, like, what is your ideal situation? How do you like to be communicated with? How can I best support you? What can I do to be the best friend and colleague to you? Even just hearing that question, you may not know the answer. You may not have some like monumental response to it. But just the
Oh,
fact that we hear that question makes us
yes.
feel better.
And what does it also give you the opportunity to do? Self-reflection, right? It's
Oh,
like a
absolutely.
loop, right?
Yeah.
It puts you in that framework to say, huh, I never really thought about that. How do I prefer to be interacted with? Or what are my best times to
Mhm.
have these kinds of meetings? Or what, for me, like personally, I do a lot of my best deep thinking work in the early morning. And so I
Same.
used to have this internal struggle with myself about, the the first thing you have to do is work out, and then you do the XYZ. And so I would just struggle with that because I do my best deep thinking. I do my best writing and my best creating in the early morning hours when it's quiet. And so I finally had to have a reckoning with myself. And I'm kind of going off topic here, which is the workout doesn't have to be the first thing. You can do it later in the day when you don't need the mental, I kind of use that time for self-reflection as well. So
Mhm.
where I was going with that is that's a little bit self-management. It's a little bit of boundary. It's a little bit of figuring out self-reflection around how you want to be interacted with. And so all of those things feed into your external communication and managing your time with others, right? That's where I was going with
Well,
that.
and even in that conversation, I think you leveraged all 4 pillars internally because you
Hmm.
were aware of how you felt. You
Yeah.
recognized and acknowledged how you felt about it. You changed the management of what you were doing with it because you were
Yeah.
saying, instead of just saying, well, I just got to get up and work out because that's the thing that I have to do. You
Right.
then
Somebody
said,
said.
yeah, you actually said, this actually doesn't work for me emotionally. I need to do something different. So you
Right.
recognize the emotion, you change the response to it, you listen to yourself. So you're having your own internal social awareness
Hmm.
and saying like, oh yeah, no, instead of just dismissing this person that may be the non-ideal version of me, I'm now saying like, no, this is okay for me to hear this and I need to
Yeah.
do something different. But then you're
Yeah.
also developing a better relationship with who you are and what you need. So
Right.
you're
Yep.
exhibiting it in real time.
Which makes you externally a better partner to work with, person to have relationship with, parent, partner, all the things, right? And
Mhm.
if you do, we call that, and you hear people say the work, the internal work. If you do that
Right.
self-reflexive work, then you're better sort of externally out to your teams, right?
Right.
So, um, yeah, I think it all starts with your own relationship with yourself. And again, the self-awareness part is so important. And then I feel like if you do those activities, sort of the relationship with others kind of works itself out a little bit, right? Because it almost by default gives you a more empathetic approach to your communication.
Mhm. And I will say that I'm the king of what I like to think are funny analogies and comparisons to make difficult topics a little bit more palatable. But I liken it. So I agree that inner work, that self-identification and self-awareness piece of it and understanding, because I think too, it's really hard, even when we're sitting by ourselves, to say, what do I really need? How do I
Mm-hmm.
really feel? What is genuine and authentic to me in this moment? Because we're so afraid of who may find that out or who may
Right.
push back against that when it's literally a conversation with ourselves.
Right.
And so when you do that, which is also, it's the most terrifying, but it's also the most valuable work you will ever do, is establishing like, here's who I am. Here's what I appreciate. Here's how I best operate. What is your favorite version of you is what I say.
Mhm.
But then also when it comes to how you reapproach the world, I always liken it to a mental house party. So if you said, this is my
That's another term. We need another
mental house
t-shirt.
party. There we go. We need to, so when we go back and record them, when we go back and look at the recording of this, we're going to have to come up with a line of
Jot
t-shirts.
down all that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you were to say, you know what, I'm having an open house for this new version of me, who am I letting in, and who is going to appreciate it? Who is going to say, you know what, I'm proud of you for doing this. And then who is going to be like, well, I don't know who she thinks she is setting these boundaries. I don't know who she thinks that she is because I need this from her. Those people were on the wrong side of your boundaries the entire time.
100%.
And
yes.
so those are the people that, number one, I don't want in my mental house party. Number two, I don't want them on my mental lawn. So they can get out as much as possible. They can stand on the sidewalk on the other side of the fence.
Yes.
And that's where I want to keep them. Yes, I still need them in my life. Maybe they're that prickly coworker or that person in my life that I just got to deal with. But at the same time, if they're just going to complain about my favorite version of me, you can just stay over there. And the people that come in are going to be the ones that value who I am, that love me for who I am and accept me for who I am. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. And again, like, you know, you mentioned something about getting too foo-foo about things, but imagine showing up to work or showing up on or waking up in the morning as the best version of yourself and living that as best as you possibly can throughout the day. Doesn't that feel like, I'm almost like my shoulders feel more relaxed just saying it out loud. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's like living in alignment, right? You have your work self and you have your, your internal self, and aligning those is a whole other level of stress relief, right? It's just your shoulders automatic. Yeah.
Yeah. I think your happiness and your performance go through the roof when that happens.
Yes. Yes. Wow. On that note, we went really deep there. That was pretty good.
We went deep, but we wound up in a house party. So I'm good with it. Whatever needs to happen.
All roads lead back to the music and the house party. Yes. Rich, this has been so much fun to talk about. I'm trying to think of like how to sort of summarize all the things we talked about. We talked about change management and how to deal with that around organizational change and how conversation and messaging is so important. And then empathetic messaging. So sort of knowing the audience and how they might empathetically or how they might respond is a way of being empathetic in your messaging. Understanding that communications are key and how you communicate is important. And then I think we spent a lot of time summarizing just emotional intelligence in general. And if you want to run through those pillars for us one more time.
Sure. So self-awareness, how you're feeling about yourself, self-management, what you're doing with those emotions, social awareness, how I'm engaging with you and how I'm actively listening and paying attention to you and engaging you. And then relationship management, which is everything rolled into one, and how we're best operating together in a two-way street.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. I think there's so many great nuggets of like how to take all of that collectively, factor that into just how you be in relationship with your coworkers, with the project, with the work that has to be done before you, and how you can work together in a better way. Because ultimately, we all want to be happy, healthy humans. We have work that we have to do to get a paycheck to keep the lights on. So how can we all do that in a way that will create the most positive outcome? I think that's the goal, right?
Well, as I'm thinking about how this episode is unfolded, landing on emotional intelligence and how we can be our favorite version of ourselves is actually what makes everything else that we've talked about successful. Because if you're not doing those things, nothing else will be as impactful or successful. Yes, you will have some success. Yes, you will have some impact. But when we focus on ourselves and become our favorite version of ourselves, the most optimal version of ourselves, everything else goes up from a happiness and success standpoint. As you're listening to this episode, focus on you and then work backwards into everything else, and it will all take care of itself.
I think mic drop. That was it.
Bam. Done.
This was so much fun. If you want more information on how to work with Rich, all of his links are going to be below. If you want to talk to me about implementations, I'm here, emotional intelligence, and the DJ house party. Your man is Rich Bracken. Thank you so much for joining me today. We have to attach a playlist to this episode for sure.
Oh, we absolutely. We're going to call it the emotional house party.
Yes.
That is going to be the name of the playlist.
I love it. Thank you so much, Rich.
Thank you.